Welcome back, everyone, to the 10th episode of the Frosty Canucks podcast. I'm your host, Jason, along with Frosty, and we're finally double digits.
Woo!
Where's your witty saying?
I was going to say something, but then you got into the double digits thing, so...
Oh, you can still say it.
Okay, no tendies.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's it. That's the thing.
This week, we have a few discussion points, and the first is going to be about something that happened with Valve and the EU.
I assume that by the time everyone listens to this, they may or may not have already heard about this, but the Cliff's Notes version is that the European Commission, which is like I don't know enough about the European Union to say exactly what it is, but it's like a governing body that determines when something is breaking the law in the European Union part of Europe. Basically, this is just a body that exists to find the shit out of companies. Usually, it results in good things, not in this case. So the finding is that Valve and 5 different publishers, Bandai Namco, Capcom, Focus Home Interactive, Koch Media, and ZeniMax, so Bethesda's owners, were using Geo Blocking on games to set regional-based pricing for games. This is normally common practice as some countries don't have the same level of equity and wealth that other countries do. So like a $60 US game, if every country in the world had to pay $60 US for a game, there would be a number of places in the world where people would just pirate things all the time because they literally could not afford to buy the games.
Well, yeah, and up here it's $80, and then with tax it's a good old 90. The change to the next gen, it's like $100 with tax for one game.
But that's still like when you convert Canadian money over to American money, that's still like $60 American and like $100 Canadian. I'm not gonna say that's not a lot of money, but it's like people can still afford to buy games. It's always been a luxury item, right? Wherein not necessarily first world wealth countries, right? People there can't necessarily afford to buy games because a $60 US game would cost as much as buying like food for 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Right.
That's not necessarily the case for some of these countries that are part of the EU. Obviously, they're part of the EU. They're not completely destitute, but so there's a handful of countries in the EU where because the regional currency is less.
Shit.
Well, yeah, it's like the money they make or like the amount of wealth their country has is not the same as the amount of wealth in, like countries like Germany, which is like the fucking front runner of the EU. Because of that, a selection of countries in the EU were being given lower prices, which violates one of the kind of like tenets of the European Union, which is that everything everywhere costs exactly the same for everyone, which is fucking stupid because some of the countries, like the amount of money that is made by some of the countries is not comparable. Fundamentally, this means that the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are suddenly going to have much more expensive games to buy because Valve, after receiving this, did not go, well, we're going to lower the prices of every other country in Europe. No, they're going to raise the price of games for, 7, 8 countries I just listed off?
Yeah.
And on top of that, like Valve has to pay like a $2 million US fine. There's other amounts of fines in there as well. They have them listed in euros here. I'm not going to convert all of them over, but I think that this is a monumentally stupid thing. I like the fact that regional pricing exists. I understand why they're doing it, given that like that's how they do, like that's how everything works in the European Union. I did ask some of my European friends who do come from countries that are part of the Union about this, and they said that's like tough tits. That's just how it is. And I'm like, but that's stupid.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't make sense, especially when, all the wealth is different depending on the country you're from. So I'm guessing this also means that like Valve is unable to kind of say like, oh, sale for these countries to kind of compensate for that, or I'm guessing it all has to be like one storefront for the EU as a whole.
I think the only place that has a different storefront, like a different version of Steam, is China.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think the same version of Steam is used everywhere else. The same version is used in North America, Europe, Asia, except in China. I know that China has certain games that cannot be sold, so there's some different stuff if you're in China.
But I thought games like the South Park, like Stick of Truth and like the Fractured Butthole, they're banned in Australia.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be also the same store, or?
So it would look at your account, see where your account's from. So like my account's registered to obviously they can tell because I got all my traffic is from Canada, I download from a Canadian download service and server rather, and I pay with a Canadian credit card, so they know I'm from Canada. Just like they know my buddy, frequent question asker, Thomas, he's from Australia because he has all of his traffic come through Australia. So like fundamentally, I have like a Canadian Steam account and he has an Australian Steam account, and that's how they keep track of this is the price that you pay for games and this is the price that you pay for games. Which sidebar, people from Australia get fucked over so bad for absolutely zero reason. They have to pay more money for games than we do. I don't know why. Like the Canadian dollar and the Australian dollar is almost identical, but Australians have to pay like fucking 10% more for all their games. It's actual garbage. I have no idea why. Especially when most games are digital now. It makes no sense for them to cost more. I mean, they do cost more because the price of games never comes down. It always goes up, but...
Well, I mean, you just wait for a sale at that point, yeah.
Yeah, well, even during sales. Because the principal's still higher, right?
Yeah.
So that's how they, like, we're keeping track of stuff. And then, like, they were using a piece of technology I'm not super duper familiar with, but they would look at where the person was coming from. And then if they're from a certain region and they try to, like, switch over to a different region, Steam would just be like, no, you can't do that. You're lying. Kind of like how if you have a 3DS in Canada, if you want to pay less money on digital purchases, you can just say you're from Alberta. They have a lower sales tax, so you get charged less tax on your purchases if you do that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if they've actually implemented geo blocking properly into the Switch, but that worked on the 3DS.
Geo province blocking.
I mean, in Ontario, we got to pay higher sales tax, right? So
yeah, we do. 13% on everything. Used to be 15%.
Did it really?
Yeah, don't you remember when Stephen Harper, that was his shtick? Like on this first election, he wanted to just lower the sales tax, and it was like 1%, and then went down by another %. Yeah.
No, I don't remember that. But Harper was in government before, like when I was in high school, and I had no money. So
fair enough.
Yeah, I didn't start having money until after Harper was gone. I don't really pay tax on anything I buy on Steam, so because Steam doesn't charge me tax because they put all my purchases through on a tax haven.
Yeah, speaking of that, that's going away from the PlayStation Store in June.
The Canadian government's trying to crack down on that
yeah.
really hard, but like Valve has no presence in Canada. Because that's the thing, they're like, oh, like the big thing that they've had so far is if you have a presence in the country, they can charge you for it.
Which is what Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly. And Valve hasn't had a presence in the country, which is why they haven't had to. But they're like, now we want everyone to pay, even if they don't have a presence in Canada. And I'm like, well, good luck enforcing that on a fucking American company that has no offices in your country. I can't see them paying a dime. And it's like, well, then the Canadian citizens need to be honest and just pay the tax. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not going to know. Fucking government already takes enough money from me. If they want more of it, they can ask for it. If they can prove that I owe them the money, then I'll give it to them. But if they can't, I'm not going to give them extra shit. They already waste enough of our money on bullshit.
I think there was Netflix and then PlayStation Store. Those are the two things that would impact me the most on sales.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they started charging like Uber and stuff that as well. Because they weren't charging them anything. But I have no idea how they're going to get money out of like Amazon or Valve. The American government can't get money out of Amazon. The Canadian government sure as shit isn't going to get money out of Amazon. Like, you fucking kidding me?
We're just going to ask please, and then when they say no, we're just going to say sorry.
Yeah, that's basically, like, the way that the bill was worded, Trudeau just, like, expected companies to be honest, and I'm like, wow, you really are the dumbest piece of shit, aren't you?
Yeah, that's pretty foolish.
I don't know. I think I said it before on one of my streams, but Trudeau's a very funny man. He's a very funny man entirely because he just like some of his policies just like make no sense, and some of the things he just expects people to do is just like, what the fuck? Have you not lived in this world for the last however old you are? Like, no one's gonna do this.
You fool. Yeah, I think that tax money is supposed to go to daycare or something like that. I can't remember what the purpose of it was. They added some sort of noble cause to it.
Yeah, I remember reading about that and thinking that the way that they had worded that was a crock of shit as well, but I can't actually remember why. See, the big problem I have with like every time the government's like, oh, we're getting money for this thing. It's like, why don't you just like fire half of your useless employees and then you have the money for the thing? Because like,
no, we're unionized.
Yeah, basically, it's like, oh my god, government employees should not be unionized. Holy shit. Fucking public sector jobs should not be allowed to unionize. Oh my god.
All right, welcome back everyone to the Frosty Political Podcast.
Yeah, welcome to me shitting on unions for the next hour. I mean, unions are fine for like certain industries, but holy shit balls, if you have a government job, you already have the fucking like, you actually have a pension. You fucking ass. Why the fuck do you need a union? Oh my god. there's so much things that we could be using our tax money on that we're not because the government just, for all intents and purposes, they just fucking embezzle the money and do nothing with it. I hate it. It makes me so mad. There's so many things that we need to spend that money on that we don't because instead, like a bunch of fucking rich ass bureaucrats are sitting on mountains of gold doing nothing with it. They're like Nintendo, but worse because they actually contribute and affect my daily life. Where Nintendo continues to be miserable, I don't have to pay attention to them.
Yeah, until they announce another Smash character and that fills up your entire Twitter timeline.
Oh, well, yeah, but that's funny. I always laugh at that, or like how Twitter fucking crashed when Minecraft Steve was announced. That was pretty funny. I thought that was pretty funny. Do you have anything else to say about not money, but like our union stuff, or like this story?
It's unfortunate for these countries. I mean, I kind of agree with some of the things that the European Commission do, like how they were kind of cracking down on loot boxes within the last year or two. So
Yeah.
I've been appreciating that because that was clearly something that needed to be done.
Yeah, I like how they got refund policies implemented in basically every storefront. That was nice. I understand why they did this. I just think it was not thought through well enough.
Well, yeah, you said it completely backfired, and they thought it would go down.
Well, I assume that's what they thought would happen, but that's definitely not what was ever going to happen. So,
Yep, now everything went to the highest price point.
yeah.
Oh well. Next thing was we had another user submitted question, but it's kind of more of a discussion piece this week.
Yeah, I feel like Mattis is really good at giving us more jumping off points for discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to paraphrase this because he uses a few words that I don't necessarily want to repeat in the podcast. In light of the podcast from, or like last episode, where we talked about, like we as in Jason and I, talked about Yakuza and we were kind of ripping on how the core combat was dog shit and we didn't like it. His question is, when is everyone going to learn the simple idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it? He listed off a few different games when there was like a massive shift or change to either like the core combat or the core mechanics of the different franchises. There was a lot of fan outcry and the games ended up selling much worse. So his examples listed are Destiny 2, Yakuza 7, Ni no Kuni 2, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which I think it's actually a spin-off, but whatever.
Yeah.
And Titanfall 2. But these are all games that radically redesigned what their specific like game series was known for. In doing so, really alienated a portion of the audience. Like in short, when will people learn to keep it simple and just do what works? Because changing the core gameplay is actually making the entire game and experience very different, which is not necessarily what people want.
Yeah. So I mean, I've played Ni no Kuni 1 and number 2. I do prefer the first one.
I think that's a universal truth.
Yes, most definitely. I loved the creature collecting in that one. It was a lot of fun getting all those creatures evolve, like leveling them up. It was basically just another Pokemon.
I was gonna say I always thought Ni no Kuni was Pokemon, and then like the second game is not Pokemon at all.
Ni no Kuni 2 is like part army simulator done poorly, and then the other half is like closer to Tales of like gameplay, but like mediocre.
It's like action or like
Yeah,
quasi-action turn-based, because like Tales is always more involved than strictly standing around and choosing a thing out of a menu and then doing it, right?
yeah. So it was that, but like Ni no Kuni, you were still like actively moving characters around, and then you'd pause when you'd like do a spell or do something like that, some sort of special move. So that's why it was kind of a quasi action, and then it would like then turn based a
Yeah.
little bit and then go back and forth. And then yeah, the other one was way more action oriented. Not that I didn't enjoy my time with Ni no Kuni 2, but yeah, it was quite the drastic change when I was not expecting that much of a change. But I mean, I guess we kind of just treat it like Final Fantasy games where almost every entry changes the formula up a little bit.
Yeah, but I'd say at this point, Final Fantasy has done that enough to where people expect it and understand that that's what's going to happen. Although I feel like the transition was a lot more gradual with Final Fantasy because the first 9,
9 to 10, yeah.
they're like menu combat based games, and then
The
I
11's
think
an online MMO.
yeah, 11's an MMO, 14's an MMO.
12 is like you basically had a bunch of inputs into your characters, and then they'd kind of just automatically do those moves. You could take over that character, but it was more like set the moves, and then they'd he'd do that action if under these conditions. There's like a something called like a gambit system. Really liked it because you could expand that to like 10 different things. Like, oh, if I get poisoned, instantly use an antidote or
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like Dragon Age or like other Western RPGs where you can
Mhm.
program how you want each character to function, and then you can take them over temporarily, and that lets you do whatever inputs you want. But when you're not controlling them, they have like a flow chart that they follow. It's like if X, do X, and then it'll be at the first step. And if that's not true, then it goes to the second step. It's like, okay, if
Mhm.
this thing, then do this thing. So you just like set up a list of commands that you want them to do so you don't have to micromanage everything. If you have like a healer, it's like, okay, the tank is supposed to pull aggro for their first command. So in theory, they're the only one taking damage. So like the healer's first step is like if tank is like below 50% health, heal tank. Then if like the healer is like below 50% health, heal yourself. If that's not true, then like cast a buff on the entire party kind of shit.
Yep.
So that's like more of a Western, like an old school Western style RPG sort of combat. And then 15 is more of like an action RPG from what I saw.
Yeah, as well as what will most likely be a 16, keeping that trend going.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess we didn't say 13, but 12 and 13 have
No,
that
we
same
skipped
system.
13. That's no one likes 13.
They both have like that same like the programmable style. I've seen 13 before. You like set up kind of like what you want the character to do that turn.
No, you autoplay the damn thing.
Yeah, that or you just autoplay it. That's I've seen that a lot. Where people just like autoplay or this just fucking let the game play itself. I'm like, wow, that's the developers know the combat in this game is ass.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I played that one before, Ni no Kuni. I didn't play the original Titanfall, but I really did enjoy Titanfall 2. I thought the sequel was a lot better than because at least had the campaign and then it had the
Yeah, so
multiplayer.
that's why Maz is highlighting that because he liked the original a lot more because the original was
Mm.
just online because he plays online multiplayer shooters, right? He didn't give a fucking a dog's dick about a single player shooter campaign because most single player shooter campaigns are not. I'm gonna come out and say it, most single player shooter campaigns are not good.
But I really enjoyed Titanfall 2's.
Yeah, Titanfall 2 is one that a lot of people said that it had like a really good single player campaign, but like I can understand where that he came from with that, where he just like wanted a really compelling multiplayer experience and for like the entire game to be focused on that instead of having the development split between a single player mode that he didn't really want to engage with and a multiplayer mode that he actually wanted to play.
Okay, I understand that, yeah.
Or like how I think Overwatch 2 is I think that Blizzard said that they wanted to do like a lot more single player and offline content with it
Yeah,
instead
that
of keeping it focused entirely on a really good core online experience, which from my perspective when they say something like that I'm like the sequel is quite literally just going to recycle the fucking online mode and they're going to add very little to it. So all the new development's going to go into the fucking offline content, and then they'll just, yeah, if it isn't broken, we're not going to fix it. Which I mean, that's kind of what Maz is saying here, right? So it's like, oh well, our online component's good, so we'll make sure we keep that exactly the same in the sequel, and then we'll just like add some extra stuff so people who don't want to play an online game will buy our game too.
yeah. I'll add like my first original idea, not from his list. Mafia 3. I played Mafia 2. I enjoyed it quite a bit because it was a lot more focused on the story. 3 is just such dog shit. Like, why the hell am I doing these repetitive missions over and over and over again, killing the same group or like
Because you're playing an open world game, and that's how open world
exactly.
games are designed, according to fucking Ubisoft and every other creatively bankrupt shitlord that just makes a giant open map and says, we have no gameplay to fill this with, so let's just fill it with a bunch of repetitive garbage instead.
Yeah, I mean, bigger isn't always better. Yes, penis joke. I
Penis
beat you
joke.
to it. I beat you to it. No, no,
You,
you can't say
s-
that. I'm editing that out.
you sack of shit. You better leave that in.
Fine.
Fucking trying to out degenerate the degenerate king over here.
I'm trying my best, guys. You won't let me. Anyway, yeah, Mafia 3. Yeah, you get the story at the last mission and that's it, and then you have to go to the next area and then beat up mob area there and then you get the story again. It's just repetitive, busy work. That's basically just copying Ubisoft and it did not look all that good. I have heard great things about the remaster of the original Mafia though. I feel like I've heard that that was really well made, unlike the remaster of Mafia 2 that did not age very well and was a shitty port.
Like all the things I can think of for if it's not broke, don't fix it, is I mean, like I obviously Yakuza 7 because I think the combat in that game is fucking awful. Like I said, I really like the old combat. Even it's like it's not super involved, but it's like more involved than I'm gonna pick the same option from the menu 4 times in a row and win every single fight. But all of the things I can think of are like Nintendo related. So Nintendo's like I mean I've complained about them a lot, but for those who don't know, I grew up playing like nothing but Nintendo stuff. It wasn't until 2014 that I started playing a lot of stuff on PC and then never, ever, ever wanting to go back. So when you like experience not Nintendo, you're like, wow, this is legitimately so much better. I have options. Things actually go on sale. There's actually a wide variety of games. Now, granted, that the wide variety of games is not true, like an advantage that PC has anymore over the Switch. Like the Switch eShop is about as bad as Steam is.
Well, yeah, Nintendo wanted like we want like 60
Games like every
indies a
day on this
day, and I
fucking
was
thing.
just like,
Yeah.
you dumbasses, you're ruining the store.
Yeah, it's and the search function on their store is not good. It is very bad, and you don't have the
Well, when there's
benefit
like
of
3,000 deals for like their New Year's special, and I'm like having to scroll through it, like 10 to 20 loaded at any given time, and you're just like, okay, time to wait. I liked this game, but I can't remember what it was called. Clearly, I should
yeah.
have written it down.
Well, Steam's search function is nothing to write home about either, but at least on PC you have Google right there, so you can be like game that's like this, and then Google will be like, this is the game you're talking about, and it'll even bring up a fucking Steam store page for it, and you're like, that's right. Thank you, Google. Because, like, Google has the most advanced fucking searching algorithm on the planet, so it's hard to compete with that. But at least, like, on PC, it's a fucking click away. On the Switch, I don't even know how you would Google things.
You can't.
You probably wouldn't. You'd probably go to your phone or your PC and you Google it that way. But yeah, so all of the examples I can think of are Nintendo related. Nintendo has a very interesting way of doing things where a lot of people criticize them for not innovating enough because their games from game to game follow like a very specific formula. Like when you play a Mario game, it's a Mario game, right? Like they're all built around the same kind of mechanics or very similar mechanics, at least the core mechanics, because it's a game about moving Mario. That's what's fun. So all of the games are built around Mario being fun to control. And then with each new Mario game they release, they usually include some kind of new gimmick. I don't know if people have taken the time to actually realize that, but like every single Mario game has some kind of new gimmick. It might not be really well integrated into the gameplay, but each one has new gimmicks. They're usually just new power-up gimmicks, but some are a little bit more involved, such as, like 64 being the first one in full 3D. So that was like the gimmick for that one.
Yeah, and then Odyssey with the hat.
Yeah, exactly. Odyssey's the hat. Sunshine was Flood. Galaxy 1 had the spin jump with the Wii remote. Galaxy 2 included Yoshi in a 3D Mario game, which is the first time that's been done. That was like the big gimmick of that game, which is why there's like a ton of Yoshi related stuff in that game. But yeah, if you take a bit of time to like study how Nintendo does things, so they always released even like Zelda, all like the different Zelda games have like their own unique gimmick. Twilight Princess is that you can turn into a wolf. Ocarina of Time is that you go between like young and adult Link. Wind Waker is that you're like sailing the high seas, so you're like kind of a pirate. They're not big differences, but they all have like some kind of unique difference, because if they don't, Nintendo doesn't see the point in making it. That's why F-Zero will never get a sequel, because Nintendo has no idea what new ideas they could even implement into that franchise. Instead, they took what was unique about that franchise and they bolted it onto Mario Kart for Mario Kart 8. Like that's how Nintendo approaches it, or like how they made Star Fox Zero, I think is what it was called.
The Wii U one.
So the gimmick of that was that it had like a really goofy control scheme.
That didn't fucking work.
Yeah, Nintendo always tries to innovate in some way, because if they can't, they're like, they won't just release a sequel that's just like the game, but, or I guess not but it's like they'll just release they won't release a sequel that's just the game that you've already played before. It has to have some kind of unique gimmick that they can say is like, this is the thing that makes this game different. Because they build a lot of their games that way, with that kind of mindset, they usually have like some kind of unifying core that makes up the identity of what that game is. Like I said, Mario is a game about a character that's really fun to control. Zelda's about going on an adventure. Pokemon is a baby's first RPG about collecting stuff. Animal Crossing is I don't know what Animal Crossing is about, but it's great for wasting time. Um, Smash Brothers is like a giant celebration of Nintendo. It's like a party game that also doubles as kind of a fighting game.
Mario Party
is the game that also no one likes. But yeah, so that's like why you get these sequels that look at like on surface glance, they look the same because they have like a unifying core, but there's always some kind of unique thing that differentiates them from one to another. And when Nintendo does that really well, they maintain good core of what makes that game really good, and then they just add new gimmicks on top of that that can accentuate it and take it in like slightly different directions, but it won't alienate people who already fundamentally enjoy that kind of gameplay. Right? That's like a really smart way of doing it. But you see sometimes when they completely run out of ideas with stuff, Pikmin's a good example. Pikmin 1, 2, and 3, every single one of those, they just added a new character. Like, so in 1, you're controlling Olimar by himself. Then in 2, they added 2 new types of Pikmin, and they added Louis. So you have to control your 2 different characters at the same time. And there's like a lot of different scenarios and gameplay puzzles and ways that you can split task force by having these 2 different playable characters. The experience of playing Pikmin is still the same, but you have new challenges, you have new problems within that context to solve. So it's like, okay, this is like something new. And then with the gamepad, it made Pikmin 3 having 3 different characters to control. That became more feasible because you could like queue up exactly what you wanted them to do and where to go and split up your forces by on the gamepad, and you could just swap between them at like a button press to do more meticulous micromanaging stuff. The fundamental experience was the same, but they added new gimmick in there to give you like a slightly different set of problems to solve. Pikmin 3's being that it was the most macro heavy of the games. But then they're like, oh, okay, well, we have no more ideas. We've already explored all of this space. We're going to make Hey Pikmin. It's a puzzle platformer. None of the things that are why people enjoy Pikmin is in this game because it's a puzzle platformer instead of a really simplified console style real-time strategy game. It was universally panned. It has a nice 69 on Metacritic, which is basically like anything below 70 is like an indictment that the game is crap because it's like you put out a game that's like serviceable and it gets a fucking 7. So it was not tremendously well received by critics, obviously. Metacritic users, their scores are about the same. Some people really liked it. Some people obviously didn't. Some people thought it was pretty middling. I didn't even give this game a chance because I'm like, well, nothing that I like about Pikmin is in this game. So that's an example of where where Nintendo was like, well, we're out of ideas for this thing, so what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to completely reinvent the wheel then. And like Star Fox Zero's very maligned control scheme, that was another example of them just completely reinventing the wheel because, well, we don't want to just retrade ground we've already done right before, right?
Even though it had been so long since a true Star Fox entry had been
Oh yeah,
done.
they could have just fucking re-released 64 with better graphics, which is fundamentally what everyone wants. People would have fucking bought that shit up.
You know what my first experience with Star Fox was? That Star Fox Adventures one where they were on the dinosaur planet because it was actually another game that was then.
Yeah, and Nintendo does that a lot as well, where if someone comes and to them with an idea and they like it enough, they'll be like, okay, we like your idea, but you have to put our characters into the game. Kirby's Epic Yarn was that. That game was originally about Prince Fluff, or second player character who's like a blue Kirby with a crown. The game was originally prototyped and about that character, and then Nintendo was like, no, Kirby. And they were like, the developers were like, okay.
we bend over, fine, whatever.
Yeah, well, instead of like Yoshi's Woolly World, where that was very intentionally built from the ground up with Yoshi in mind, Kirby's Epic Yarn was not built from the ground up with Kirby in mind, which is why none of Kirby's skills are actually present in that game. You know, Kirby's like a baby's platformer, so that's why Kirby can fly, so that you can always, if you misjudge a jump, you can always just fucking fly and not fall down in the pit. But Kirby cannot fly in that game. So instead of like being able to fly out of a jump that you screwed up, instead you just like fall down a pit and then like a little fairy comes and like rescues you or some shit. You can just tell this game was never intended to be a Kirby game. And yeah, to your point, Star Fox Adventure was never intended to be a Star Fox game. But Nintendo was like, we like what you've done, but Star Fox.
Yeah, it made so much more sense because it was like my first time playing a Star Fox game, and I'm going like, why does everyone like this shit? This is weird and kind of boring.
And Miranda really likes that game. I've never played it, and she said that I will not like it. So I'm like, all right, well, that's an experiment that we never need to put me through. Anyway, I think another thing that comes up as part of this is a want from develop to like kind of do what Nintendo does, where it's like not retread the same ground over and over again. As someone who writes software, I can sympathize with somebody else, having spent, let's say they did two games that were like, like a game one and then like a sequel to game one. So they spent like 7 years of their lives developing games for this franchise. And then the publisher comes along and says, we want a number 3. And everyone on the team just like groans because they're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do another one of these stupid things. I have no passion left for this. I have no like new interesting ideas for this. I just want like, can we do something different for the love of Christ? So then like the solution, because most people are on board with that kind of mentality, is to like, okay, let's do something radically different so that we're not bored.
Yeah, you're reminding me of there's one developer I'm thinking about, which is
There's a
owned by
number.
Activision. Like it's Beanox, and how they always had to make the Spider-Man games.
Yeah, there's like a ton of, if you do any kind of digging through game history or just like go to its different game history channels on YouTube. Did you know Gaming has a series on game history related stuff specifically that covers these kind of things where it's like a studio will just want to do something very different because they're tired of working on the same kinds of projects that they've been working on. And the solution to that is to take an already established franchise and put new mechanics into it, or like really kind of shake it up so that it's more interesting for them to work on. And you'd be like, why wouldn't you just go and make a new like franchise then? Well, new franchises are risky and the fucking publishers don't want to invest money in something that's risky. That's why it ends up being like sequel game X has like all of these really weird mechanics that don't make any sense because like the publisher doesn't want to put all of these new ideas into a new title.
Yeah, Call of Duty 20. What are we on?
Call of Duty is the most stagnant franchise on the fucking planet aside from Pokemon. They'll never put like fundamentally new ideas into that game. But yeah, it's like an instance of why I think some of these kinds of scenarios come up as much as they do, because it's not like uncommon for this shit to happen either. My solution when that happened was to get a new job at a new company. I know that not everyone has that luxury, and I think especially with Japanese software developers, from what I've seen, I think it's more of a prevailing attitude in that part of the world. But it's like you get a job and that's your job for your entire life, instead of over here where it's like, I'm bored of my current job, I'm going to start fishing around for a new job every couple like 5-10 years. As far as I've seen, it's a very North American thing.
Yep.
That might just not be like a thing that people even think is a possibility. Like, oh, I'm bored of working on this series of games. Well, then just fucking get a job somewhere else. It's like, oh no, you can't do that, that's not allowed. Right? So
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Or then you got someone like Konami who's a bit more vindictive about its staff. If I
yeah.
remember correctly, you'd have issues if you messed with Konami in a bad way.
Yeah, so I think that that's like a big part of the why, because we kind of discussed various different things, but that's kind of like the why. I don't think it'll change anytime soon. I wish it would, but especially with how games are like very big money, big business now, I think that it'll continue to happen as people just get bored and resign themselves to being like, well, we're going to do this now, I guess, because we're bored and we want to do something different and we were not able to get funding for anything else. So this is the thing that's happening now.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. At least on the AAA side. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, with the indies, we get unique
Well,
experiences for the most part.
that's not super true either. So like a lot of indie studios, or like a lot of indie games rather, are put out by like one hit wonder studios where they do like one game and then they either like completely fucking dissolve the company or they just never put out another thing that's notable. Or they'll just get stuck doing like a ton of sequels. I think Image and Form, they're like a company that I have a lot of respect for. They've taken an aesthetic and a world, the Steam World franchise, and they've made all of their games in the Steam World franchise, but from game to game to game to game, they tackle different genres. So they are able to share like a world and an aesthetic that they're very keen on, but they're able to experiment with and develop different mechanics and storylines within that context. That's a really smart way of doing it, I think. Then you have people like the developers for Dungeon Defender. What have they done? They did Dungeon Defender, then they did Dungeon Defender 2, and now they put out Dungeon Defender Awakening. Hold on, I forget the name of it. But it's like Dungeon Defender 3, but Dungeon Defender 3 is just like a remake of Dungeon Defender, like the original Dungeon Defender. I'm like, wow, you guys have spent 10 years making the exact same game. Good job. Awakened is the subtitle. Or you have Orcs Must Die from No More Robots, I think was that studio's name. That was another studio that put out like the same game for like 10 years. They never really expanded into anything else. Super Hot basically put out like everyone knows Super Hot, really like Super Hot. Did you know Super Hot had a sequel last year?
No.
Yeah, no one else did either. It was a roguelike remix on Super Hot. So it was like basically just Super Hot, but with procedural stuff instead of not procedural stuff. It cost like the same amount of money as Super Hot did. So that was like another thing where it's like, oh, we're just retreading the same ground over and over again. So it's like not every indie studio is free or, goes and actually does like new creative things every single time. And there's like a ton of indie studios that are like a group of people come together to make a game. And then afterwards, they don't like the team that made that game just breaks off and goes off to do the other shit instead. So I think that kind of, which is why you see like a lot of games that are like from random developer X, and then you never see another game from them because it's just like they just made like one game and then fucked off.
Right, like Barrelhead Studios and 420 Blaze It.
I don't know if the names are that stupid, but yes. Not everyone makes a company out of it. Like not there's like just for every like Super Giant Games or Play Dead or Image and Form, you have like hundreds of indie studios that only ever make one game and it never becomes like financially successful enough for them to continue. Or you have like indie developers who just put out like the same game over and over again until they run their company into the ground because people are tired of seeing that thing. Whatever the name of that company was that made the adventure games that everyone got tired of. I'm having a brain fart to start with a T.
The
They're
adventure
really
game?
big. Telltale.
Oh, yeah, duh. Yeah. I mean, that was also a lot to do with the licensing too, and
There was a lot of problems with that studio.
hmm
Super Bunny Hop has an excellent video on the run up to and the ultimate demise of Telltale. If you want to watch it, I think it's about 30 minutes long. It's extremely well researched and very well presented.
yeah, I'd have to agree with Frosty on that. I've watched it once before. I don't
Yeah,
remember a whole lot on it, but if I rewatched it, yeah, now it'd still be as good.
George is one of the only people on the internet who I pay money to via Patreon. He does extremely good work.
Very cool.
I refer to him like I know him in person, but I don't. I wish I did. He's a really cool guy, but he makes really good content, really well researched, well presented, well thought out content. He's a very smart guy. That's if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, don't fix it.
I believe you had the next topic, which is good because I'm tired of introducing topics. So it's your turn to introduce something.
This will be a quick topic then. Games that we think should stay dead, so i.e., don't have a sequel. Kind of blends a little bit with the last topic that we were having. So,
Well, just for my benefit and for everyone listening. So, what exactly do you mean? You mean games that did not get a sequel that should continue to not get a sequel, or games that are presently being made that we want to see die?
well, I meant the first one a bit more.
Okay, so games that are dead that we want that should remain dead,
E-
lost to the annals of history.
yeah. So this question comes up because recently Killzone, the website for that, had been finally taken offline, and so people kind of concluded, "Oh, this series must be dead." And for me, it was like,
Good.
yeah, good. I didn't enjoy Shadowfall all that much, and I'm glad that Guerrilla Games is doing something that they did something new with Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, it's a studio that definitely got tired of making Killzone games. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
exactly. So this clearly was not going to come back. So that's what made me kind of think of a dead game, a killed game, if one must say. I've got down Dead Space. I do not want EA to ever revive that game series, even though I know a lot of fans do. I think it
So
would.
I agree with you on that. I'm gonna let you finish your point before I chime in, though, and say why I want it to remain dead.
Well, part of it is to do with the fact that it changed directions in the third game so drastically with being action oriented. So I've
Okay.
played the first one, I've watched a playthrough of the second one, and that I got through about a third of the third one. I know this is bad. I mean, it didn't help that EA was shoveling in microtransactions left, right, and center into that game, but because EA destroyed the studio who made that game, I don't think a fourth Dead Space entry is one possible. Two would probably piss off a lot of the fans because obviously the developer making that is not the one who's going to be making it. It might be staff from it, but it's not going to be the same developer, especially since they made them make Battlefield Hardline, which the servers just went down for that apparently the end of last year.
So like your first point is the reason why I wouldn't want another one, like because like EA started with it, and it had a very clear vision from Visceral.
Yeah, that's who made it. Visceral Games.
So Visceral had a very clear idea of like a very engaging horror style game, right? And then progressively over the entirety of that franchise, it got more and more action oriented because horror games do not sell the kind of numbers that EA wanted.
Yeah, EA wanted the first one to be like this blockbuster hit, and it sold well, but it obviously didn't sell.
It sold well for a horror game. It did not sell well for a
EA game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically it. If it came back, it'd be like another third-person action game, and it would like the survival horror stuff. I guarantee you would just like not be there at all. Or if it was, then it would be severely dialed back because like they don't want to put a lot of money into a game that they know isn't going to sell, right? So I would imagine to be either a completely different experience than what people wanting, or an experience that is like a lower budget kind of experience, which would probably piss some people off anyway because it was like a AAA style game. So
let Dead Space stay dead.
A dead space stay in a dead space.
Yeah, in the corner in Visceral's grave that EA made because they didn't know what to do with that studio and then just axed it.
Yeah. What other games do you have listed?
Shenmue.
Oh, fucking Jesus Christ.
Do not make a fucking Shenmue 4.
There's a game that should have remained dead forever. Holy fuck. Shenmue 3 shouldn't exist. I don't give a fuck if you like or is it Shenmue or Shenmue?
Shenmue.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fucking game franchise. It killed one console. It should not have been allowed to come back. Good God. Why? Why even the fuck? And what's even funnier to me is it is spoilers for Shenmue 3. Not that any of you fucking assholes should care. But like,
this was supposed to be the last game, and then it's
and it ends on a fucking cliffhanger.
Yeah.
The story progresses not at all. And then it ends on the same fucking cliffhanger that 2. Oh my God. Oh Lord Jesus. This game is so bad. If for no other reason for that, just that it was supposed to like end the story, and all it does is just not go anywhere for however long the duration of the game is, and then just Jesus Christ. I can't even. I like the white bitches at Starbucks. I can't even with this shit. Ugh. But yeah, Shenmue, fuck, Jesus Christ, that game needs to be hit over the head, and so does everyone who's responsible for bringing it back.
We're giving you an aneurysm?
Yeah, man, I get an aneurysm every time I think about that game. Holy shit, what a disaster of a game. Fuck.
Yeah, and I played the first one just because like it was the collection. I was just like, it's like $20. May as well give this a try and see what all the memes are about. Fucking waiting for the sale, or fuck's sake.
Can you confirm exactly what I think about that game? That game is only beloved because it was really, really, really pretty for the time that it came out. And that it's a perfect case study of gamers will always look past shallow gameplay if the graphics are pretty enough.
Yeah, so I mean, for the viewers, I had a Sega Dreamcast. Now, granted, this was also when the Dreamcast was fucking dead.
I was gonna say, you did have a Dreamcast. I forgot about that.
But the one game that didn't work, or my other cousins, they had the same game. It was Shenmue, so I could never play Shenmue. So I felt like when this collection came out, I was just like, for like 1 and 2, I had to just pick it up because I was like, I've been wanting to play that for so long, just because I remember seeing it like a little bit at my cousin's place, and it looked so like realistic for the time. Because granted, this was like 2000 and like.
This is back when everyone still had like fucking like a JPEG of like The Rock's face stretched over a block for WWE, right? Like, but then you look at Shenmue and you're like, wow, the characters' faces actually look like a face.
Groundbreaking. Now, if only the gameplay.
Yeah, well, there is none. That's why it sucks.
Yeah, no, there is gameplay. It's when you get to the end and you have to move a bunch of crates with the.
When you get a job in the game.
Yeah, exactly. That's when the game becomes fun. That's the sad part. That's the most fun in the game.
Oh my good lord.
In that like kind of chapter of the game. I'm not joking. That's actually probably the most fun I had with the game. Like that mini game.
Holy Jesus. Yeah, what jeez, that was a good pick. Okay, what else do you have on this fucking list?
Well, I have as a joke Final Fantasy. Stop calling it Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that one's fun. You know why it's called Final Fantasy, right?
Because it
That's
was supposed to be his last game, yeah. And
yeah,
then,
before the
yeah,
company folded, and then it sold really fucking well, and they're like, well, I guess this is the franchise now.
it's just funny because we're on Final Fantasy 16, and every time everyone
Yeah.
just makes a joke. That's not very final, is it?
Well, it's not even Final Fantasy 16. It's Final Fantasy 18.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because
Point.
there's 3 13s, right?
Well, wait, but then there's 2 10s.
Oh, is there? So it's Final Fantasy 19 then.
And then there's technically 2 14s because the World
No,
Reborn was
no, that's not how MMOs work. That MMO was bad, and then they fucking deleted it and replaced it with a giant update.
All right, fair enough.
Which they actually wrote into the story. Did I ever tell you about? Because I've played through Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn.
Yeah, that world just blew up basically.
Yeah, they're like, Bahamut summoned a meteor and destroyed the world. That was them memeing on the fact that they actually like blew up the original game because it was just a fucking piece of shit.
I really like that they actually had the humor for that.
I think that's a really interesting way to weave in a meta narrative into the story. I actually really respect that a lot. Even though I think it's goofy as hell, I really like it. So
I mean, now it's like it's like such a successful game for them now.
Yeah, well, it's one of the only MMOs that can actually compete with World of Warcraft. So
it's impressive.
That really is, because like WoW is like it's like the king of the jungle for MMOs, right? So
well, WoW's been around for like what 20 or something years. It feels like it's been so long.
Well, I'm 27. It has not been around for 20 years.
I remember seeing it like in stores when I was younger, but
World of Warcraft came out in 2004.
Okay, I'm not that far off.
It'll be 20 by the time I'm 30, which actually makes sense. But right now it is not 20. It'll be 17 in November.
Okay, I'm not that far off.
But I'm like, I am not 30 yet. That game cannot be 20 years old.
Okay.
I'll be 30 eventually, and then it'll be 20 years old.
Anyway, that was the main 3 that I had.
Yeah, I don't have any specifically, because like most games that are dead, I'm like, well, you're dead for a reason, so you should just stay dead. Bubsy, holy fuck, that game should not have been anything. Man, that's a series that should have been lost to time. Bubsy's so fucking, oh god. The reason they brought it back was because it was like a whole fucking meme, and they thought they could make money off of it, and I think they probably did.
Oh, they definitely made at least some, but I think. But that game that came out was like really, really short, so a lot of people said they were like refunding it because it was like an hour or too long at most. And the Valve's refund policy was like, "Oh, I can refund this. Fuck yeah, I will."
Yeah.
Pirates license? What for?
Yeah, fuck you, Bubsy, you piece of shit.
Yeah, let's see what he said. Other things he said, because that's the one I remember.
It's the only one I remember too.
You're 24 years too late to catch me. You have some unfinished business with the Woolies. Well, get in line, pal. I've been waiting to settle the score since 1993.
I was gonna say they're referencing the fact that game came out the year I was born, and someone does like, oh, I've been waiting 24 years for this. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake! That's not. Ugh.
Why is this a line? My wife left me.
Is that actually in the game?
That's what this wiki page I've picked up on has said.
I'm guessing that no one really edits the Bubsy wiki.
I hope not. Pain is not in my contract. Pouncing really makes me hungry. Is it Taco Tuesday yet?
Fuck Taco Tuesday. How about Taco Sunday?
No, Sushi Sunday.
I ain't got time for Sushi Sunday. I want Taco Sunday.
All right, fine.
Anyway, I don't have anything to add besides just in general. If a game series is dead, I don't want it. I generally speaking don't want it to come back. There's a reason it is dead. If you were asking about games that we want to see die, good God, can we just fucking kill Paper Mario? Like,
how about we have that as a separate discussion another week?
Yeah, because I'm just, oh God, the fucking new Paper Marios they put out are just so. I know that came to the mic.
It did.
Oh God. Anyway,
all right.
Let's get into the games we've been playing.
Hell yeah, let's get into the games we've been playing. You want to start or me?
I guess I can start. I wanted to finish Yakuza Like a Dragon, but I have not played it since the last, or I haven't really played it since the last time we touched the podcast. I'm finally at the point where I'm like, Yakuza out. So I got 5 chapters left in the game. I'm pretty sure I can just blitz through the end.
Yeah.
I just wanted to finish off the side stories with some of the characters you get later in the game. I keep going to the strip club and then grinding their relationship up really high at the strip. Well, I guess it's like a cabaret club.
It's a cabaret
club.
But
it's basically, I don't know, it's like a Japanese strip club. You go in, you pay money, the women come over, they're fucking scantily clad, touch you. It's kind of like the strip club.
It's classier strip club.
You can call it a classy strip club. That doesn't make it a classy strip club. Yeah, and then like that grinds up the relationship for all the male members of your party, which all of the guys who I need to get up still are male. So it's like go do
Right.
that, get them to like the next Bond bar, and then go to Survive bar, talk with them, and then I think the last two guys you get, I'm almost done the one, and I've got like I think the one's like level 3, so I gotta get them to like level 4 and then level 5, and then I can be done with that. And then once I'm done those side stories, then I'm just gonna fucking rip through the last 5 chapters of the game. I don't know, I might do that this weekend. I was planning on doing it last weekend, but instead I played Monster Hunter the entire time.
Yeah, you were streaming it, and then last Friday and for Frosty Friday,
Yeah,
and then
I've
you were just like, I was going to play Yakuza, but Monster Hunter ate up another like 20
yeah,
to 30 hours.
I've almost put 80 hours into Monster Hunter since the new year ticked over, and that's 80 hours in like a 2 week period. I've spent like as much time working at my job as I have playing Monster Hunter. This is very normal. This is how I play this game. I really enjoy Monster Hunter, but also it frustrates the fuck out of me. Obviously, a lot of people who listen to this watch me stream every Friday. So I played the Monster Hunter Rise demo, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I like this. So then I went back and played Monster Hunter World and was like, oh yeah, I really like this. It had been a while since I have played. I was not a super big fan of Iceborne. The big reason for why I don't like Iceborne is because a bunch of new mechanics were introduced in Iceborne that I think are really bad, specifically
Mm.
because they don't integrate with the gameplay very well. I wrote an entire article. I have not finished editing it. It's about the Clutch Claw, the big new mechanic that was introduced in Iceborne, and it is just the biggest piece of shit. Everything about it does not work in the context of Monster Hunter, and I really think it's just not integrated at all, and that's why it sucks. So it's like a grappling hook you have that you can hook onto the monster with. When you do that, you can then do a combo attack that tenderizes that part of the monster, which makes them take extra damage, which is great. Or you can line up the monster's head by smashing them a few times, and then you can use what's called a flinch shot, and that will send them flying into a wall. And if they collide with the wall, they take a shitload of damage, and then they're toppled over. So that gives you a huge opportunity to do a big combo against them.
That sounds cool.
It's really cool in concept. It doesn't work at all. The Clutch Claw is slower than the Great Sword. The Great Sword is the slowest weapon in the game.
What?
Using this, it's so fucking clunky and imprecise. So it just feels super unresponsive. It doesn't feel very good to use. There'd be a ton of times where it says it's locked onto a certain part of the monster. You'll fire it off, and then the monster will move, and then it just won't connect. Which is like, because it showed you this like giant bright orange reticle, it's like, hey, you're like locked on, you'll hit. But then you don't. It's like, it just creates this huge visual disparity.
So it's only good for like stationary targets?
Yeah, so I play a lot of the slow weapons. I treat using the Clutch Claw like those weapons. I need a massive opening, and instead of hitting the monster, I'm going to grab onto their head and try to line up a flinch shot. Speaking of flinch shots, sometimes the monsters will glitch out with collision detection, and instead of colliding with the wall, they'll just slide along it, even though they should have definitely hit the wall, which is always frustrating, especially because in Monster Hunter, like if you make one mistake, the monster can very easily kill you. So it's like, why is it the game's allowed to make a mistake when I'm not? That's bullshit. Especially when it's like I did everything correctly and the game didn't respond the way it was supposed to. So that's like a collision detection problem that happens. It doesn't happen often, but every time it happens, you're like, what the fuck, man? And then the other really shitty thing with the Clutch Claw is that it's not integrated with any of the weapon movesets, except for the hammer and the lance. Well, I think it had the Switch Axe has something too, but and I guess they added the dual blades. I had one in a post-launch update, but so like to use the Clutch Claw, you just have to like stop doing what you're doing and then put your weapon away and then aim the claw and then fire it, or like stop attacking and aim the claw and fire it, instead of it being integrated as like a seamless part of your combos. It's this like really clunky, like stop doing what you're doing and then you can use the Clutch Claw. So on that basis, I don't feel like it works very well. I mean, I already thought this mechanic was dog shit, like in the way that it was implemented, but it became especially apparent when I played the Rise demo, because the gimmick they have in that is called like the fuck, I already forgot. It's like thread bugs or like bug. It's basically it's a bug powered grappling hook So it's like the Clutch Claw, but instead of being dog shit, it's not. So it does a lot, kind of similar-ish functions to the Clutch Claw, except instead of like being all fucking like unresponsive feeling, whenever you fire it off, you'll always be pulled to wherever you fire it to. You can still miss with it, so you can still fly way past the monster if you didn't like line up the shot correctly, but there's still follow through instead of there being absolutely zero follow through, which just feels bad.
Mm.
And then the other thing is that each weapon has 2 specific moves built around using this function. So it has like 2 charges, and then like the one move uses one of those, and they recharge over time. So like the one move uses one of those charges and is usually a mobility based move where you like fire it out and then pull yourself toward wherever you were aiming. But it's like integrated so that you can seamlessly use it as part of your combos. And then when you finish doing that grapple move, it goes into a move that you can then combo out of. So it feels like it's actually part of the move set. And then like the second one uses both charges and it does like a super move kind of thing where you'll do like a very big kind of finisher combo type thing. But in this way, it actually feels like it's part of the weapon's move set instead of being this like clunky fucking add-on they threw on without thinking about how it integrated with any of the weapons at all. So in that way, it feels a lot better because there's follow through with it. It feels a lot more responsive, and then it actually is integrated really well into each of the weapons. So that it just ends up feeling really smooth, really seamless. It feels like it's part of the weapon's moveset instead of being this thing that was just fucking farted out and bolted on in an expansion, which is exactly what the Clutch Claw is. I also really don't like any of the endgame content in Iceborne because a lot of the endgame content is built around using the Clutch Claw, and I fucking hate using it. So the siege fight they have in Iceborne is a little bit better than the siege fight they had in the base game, but you have to use the Clutch Claw constantly. Thank God the monster you fight is just super brainless, so using the Clutch Claw reliably isn't super hard. You just like claw onto the monster constantly and then just tenderize its parts and then beat the shit out of it. Versus a really boring kind of raid style fight.
Like the Shadow of the Colossus style, or?
Yeah, you're just grabbing onto like different parts, like to tenderize them so that it takes more damage so you can break the parts to get a better reward. But yeah, the monster's like huge. It's supposed to be fought by 4 people.
Mm.
And then they introduced a new version of Elatrion, which is just the dumbest fucking piece of shit fight in this game. It's like another MMO, like a quasi MMO fight. Elatrion is known for being an elemental dragon that switches elements. So in Iceborne, it has a fire mode, an ice mode, and a dragon mode. The general way that it fights is it starts in fire mode, and then it does like fire attacks, and then it will switch to dragon mode, where it does like all different elemental type attacks, and then it switches to ice mode, where it does like mostly ice moves. The trick is they added an artificial difficulty mechanic. When it switches from dragon mode back to an elemental mode, it will use a full screen attack that you cannot avoid, and it will one-shot you. This is not uncommon. They've done this before, but in the previous instances they've added one-shot moves. It was like a positional check, like the siege fight that I was just talking about before. That monster is called Safi Jiva. It will occasionally do a nuke that hits the entire arena, but when it goes off, it like rears up, and then like at that moment it fires out like a blast, and there's like it slowly starts to like drop down, and like energy flames and shit will be coming out over the entire arena, and then you'll see like different spikes that are coming out of the arena that you have to like run towards and hide behind. So that's like just like positioned really, really, really poorly. That's just like a positional check, so it's not like a huge deal. Versus Elatrion, that is not a thing. The only way to survive its mega I'm gonna kill you all right now move is to pass a damage check, which is always the dumbest way to artificially increase the difficulty of a fight. What's worse is it's not even a straight damage check, it's an elemental damage check. So you can't just do damage to it, it only accounts the elemental damage you did to the monster. So if it's in fire mode, you have to do like ice damage to it. If it's in ice mode, you have to do fire damage to it. But you can't switch your fucking weapon partway through the fight. So another artificial difficulty thing they added to it was while it's in dragon mode, you can break its horns. And if you break its horns, then it can't switch to ice mode. If it started in fire mode, it just switches back to fire mode instead. So you can actually like continue to do ice damage to it and actually pass the elemental damage check. Aside from the fact that like that is super antithetical to how Monster Hunter works in general, what I just described is a fucking MMO raid fight. It's like a fucking WoW boss fight. That's not like a Monster Hunter boss fight. It's a fucking WoW boss fight. Here's some other things that don't work at all about the boss fight. Number one, Elatrion constantly attacks, but you have to tenderize it repeatedly, otherwise you won't do enough elemental damage to it, and you will fail the damage check. You get knocked off of the monster anytime they go to attack, and this thing attacks constantly, and the combos for tenderizing are really, really, really slow. So the only way to bypass that is to use a specific type of item that makes it so you don't get whipped off the monster, but if you do that and it uses like a really strong attack, you'll just die because you still take damage. Well, I guess if you use the Temporal Mantle, you won't, but so that's a thing that makes soloing this monster prohibitively difficult. If you do it in a group, this fight is actually kind of doable. But yeah, if you do this alone, it's like fucking the hardest thing in the world because you just don't have the resources to reliably pass the damage check. Number two, you can only break its horns twice, which means that the third time it goes to do an elemental shift, it will elemental shift, and then your weapons will stop doing stuff. So there is a soft timer on the fight for how long you have to actually beat it before there's no way you'll do enough elemental damage because like in ice mode, it doesn't take any ice damage, and there's no way to swap your weapons mid-fight unless you die, which you don't want to do.
Yeah, no one wants to die.
Yeah. The third thing that's kind of dumb is that the flint shot, if you line up the first flint shot, it's very easy when it gets up to immediately fire off the second flint shot and break its horn so that you can prevent it from doing the elemental shift. But there's only 3 places in the entire arena where you can actually smash it into a wall. The wall is extremely small, so you have to use an ultra specific, very well aimed flint shot. The mechanics for doing flint shots do not allow you to correctly or reliably do that. On top of that, sometimes it will do that thing where it glitches out and doesn't collide with the fucking wall correctly, and it will just slide alongside the wall, which did happen to me a number of times when I was trying to do the fight alone, which just super duper pissed me off because it's like the monster ran at the wall for like 20 seconds and then like slid off of it, and I'm like, what the fuck was that? Everything I don't like about Iceborne is encapsulated in this fight. It forces you to use the clutch claw. It's overly reliant on how like this really inconsistent mechanic that's not integrated really well with any of the weapon movesets. And on top of that, I guess I forgot to say, it forces you to use elemental damage on stuff. Why is that a problem? All the slow weapons don't do enough elemental damage at all because they attack slow and elemental is not scaled with damage. It's a straight value.
It really doesn't work with your play style then.
Yeah, it doesn't work if you use slow, heavy hitting weapons because it's like mathematically the numbers behind it doesn't scale. So like a great sword and like a sword and shield, if they have like 20 elemental damage, they both do 20 elemental damage. If a sword and shield can attack 5 times in 10 seconds and a greatsword can attack once in 10 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sword and shield do 100 elemental damage. The greatsword can only do 20, which means that slow weapons cannot do even remotely enough elemental damage to pass the elemental checks reliably. So you have to use fast weapons because they benefit very, very heavily with the specific mechanics for how elemental is implemented into the game. The elemental damage should not at all be done like that, but Capcom's Monster Hunter team has made no attempts to fix that. That specific implementation of elemental damage has been very consistent across the last several games. I think it might be consistent across the entire franchise, but I've only played World, and I have friends who have only played back as far as like the 3rd generation of games. I think World is like the 5th or 6th. So I only have like about half of the franchise's history. But in their...
Yeah, I think it's the 6th. Yeah.
Yeah, and in their entire time playing, they have said Elemental has always been great on fast attacking weapons and dog shit on slow weapons. And I almost exclusively play slow weapons. So I was like, wow, this fight was tailor-made to just fucking piss me off. So it should go without saying, I cannot finish that fight. At least not alone, anyway. I'd need like a party of people to go in with me to actually be able to do it. That fight for me is very antithetical to what makes Monster Hunter super duper good. There's some other stuff in the end game that I'm not super jived about either, but like that's like kind of the big thing where I'm like, why in fuck's creation did you put an MMO boss into a game that is an action RPG? Like, what the fuck? What is this garbage doing here?
Yeah, it's too bad it's not scaled for a single player.
It is, but like the problem with the single player experience is that you have to be very, 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 very good to be able to finish it. And I am not very, very, very good. I'm like okay at the game. So I need like a party of people who are also okay at the game. And then I'm sure we could just fucking kick the shit out of this monster. The same as like, it wouldn't be like easy, but like a lot of monsters are super easy when I'm in a group with people who are around my skill level. because I solo most of the monsters in the game, right? So like when I have 3 other people to work with, it's like, oh my god, we just fucking destroy the monster. I almost feel bad for them in that case. But this boss is like designed to be very challenging. So I'm like, okay, it'd be a challenge if there was like a bunch of people who were at my skill level and we were working together, but I'm positive we could finish it. But alone, I'm like, I am not good enough to finish this alone. This was very clearly designed to be done with a lot of people, and I am not a lot of people.
We can't handle clones of you with that much degeneracy. That would be
Yeah, I jokingly said
awful.
if there was a party of 4 me's, we would have finished this fight already.
Yeah, and you'll be teabagging the corpse.
Oh yeah, did I ever teabag the corpses on stream?
I don't remember.
That's a thing I do privately, at least. I will when I have like a particularly shitty time with a monster, I'll usually teabag the corpse of the monster after I kill them.
That's fair.
Monster Hunter is a game I really, really enjoy, and that's why I'm so passionately angry about how like poorly implemented this endgame stuff is. But yeah, in general, I really enjoy playing Monster Hunter, obviously. It's just that I don't like a lot of the stuff that was implemented in the end game. So I've been basically just going back and fighting empowered versions of the monsters that I'm already familiar with that are not like borderline impossible to do alone at my skill level anyway. And been getting a lot more mileage out of just doing that. I'm like, oh man, I love this stuff. But yeah, not a fan of the Elatrion fight.
So you'd recommend the base game for Monster Hunter,
I'd
not the sequel,
I'd
or not
no,
that.
I'd recommend World and I'd recommend Iceborne. I'd just say it comes with the caveat of like don't use the clutch claw. You even saw like when I was playing on stream, I used the clutch claw like I will say I use the clutch claw sparingly. I almost never tenderize the monster because I view that as just being a complete fucking waste of time. But like I'll use flint shotting because it gives me a huge opening. If the right circumstances present themselves, which I mean I've trained myself after hundreds of hours of play to figure out when those openings are, right? So I know when to do it. It's just like when it misses, I'm like, well, that was stupid. And that happens like, like 1 or 2% of the time. And then yeah, I just don't engage with some of the other mechanic, like the tenderizing mechanic, unless I'm playing in a group. In which case, it's like, oh, we're just gonna beat the shit out of this monster now. I can actually afford to like tenderize because my tenderizing of a certain part is like very beneficial to the group. Where when I'm playing alone, it's like not super beneficial to me. But yeah, I'd still say that like Iceborne is fine. It's just that the clutch claw is dog shit, and the clutch claw is in like the base game now too, because the Iceborne's fundamentally like on disc DLC, even if you buy the game digitally. So you can still use the clutch claw in the base game now that that update's gone into it. So yeah, I'd say if you're gonna buy World, I'd say buy like the combo pack that gets you World and Iceborne. Just maybe don't use the clutch claw too much unless you're playing with a group of people. And the only other thing I've been playing is I finished up Fire Emblem Awakening. Now, I think on the last podcast I was singing it praises. Is that correct?
You were on chapter 11 or 12 or something like that,
Okay, so
and
I
you
played
were
the back half of the game, and the back half of the game was dog shit. Immediately after the place where I was in the game, I got to the chapters where every single map is you're put up against a force that is way the fuck too big to fight in any amount of like with any amount of strategy. So they repeatedly just throw themselves at your units. They just die. They always go after the unit they mathematically they can do the most damage to if they hit. It doesn't matter what the hit chance is. If they hit this unit, they will do damage. That is the only thing that goes into the calculation. So they'll attack like units that have a super high avoid chance because they have no defense, but then they'll just never hit. And then that unit with the super high avoid chance will just beat the shit out of them and kill them afterwards. You kill however many units on your turn, and then you just watch the enemy, like half of their force, commit suicide the next turn. That's not even like hyperbolic. I went from having like 20 turns on a map to all of the maps taking like 8 turns or less because the enemy forces would just run me down, like they'd run down my units and then they just die. And I'm like, well, this is not strategic at all. This is really boring. In fact, I don't like this. And it got even worse when I started to unlock Gale Force on units because that let me use Gale Force cheese. So I could play even more aggressively stupid than I already was, which made the AI play even more aggressively stupid.
as someone who's not played
Yeah, I was gonna
Fire
say
Emblem, what the hell's Gale Force?
So Gale Force is the cheesiest, most broken skill in the game. It is such that when a unit with Gale Force kills a unit on their turn, they gain the ability to take another action. You can already see why that would be
God.
extremely broken.
One shot. No, one shot.
Yeah, exactly. So you just And it's a skill that the Pegasus Knights get, right? So they already have 8 movement. They already have the most movement in the game. So you pair them up with somebody to buff up their stats, and then you just run them super deep into enemy territory with Gale Force, and then you just leave them there. And they'll murder everything that tries to attack them because nothing will be able to land a hit. Like, nothing will be able to land a hit. It's actually ridiculous. See, I had 4 units that had Gale Force at the end of the game. Every turn they took, they'd wipe out 8 of the enemy units, and then the enemy's turn would happen, and then like another 10 enemy units would or more would just commit suicide, which sounds like a lot, but when you're fighting an enemy force that has like 60 units in it, it's like, okay, like Jesus. So I keep forgetting like why I don't like that game so much. It stems from a few different things, but largely it's that the enemy has no sense of self-preservation because it hasn't been coded into them at all. That's part of why I think Advance Wars is better. In Advance Wars, your unit's strength is linked to their HP, and that means that if you attack first, you are advantaged, which means that the enemy is constantly positioning themselves such that if you try to strike them first, they can strike you back even harder. A lot of the time, you as the player will have to send out like a bait unit to get the enemy to break formation so that you can, start finding the cracks in their armor. If you don't, then they just kind of like they'll play like super duper defensively until they like spawn a unit that has like a shitload of movement, like a bomber or something. They always position like very aggressively defensively and have like a really solid defense until they decide that they want to attack. And usually that requires you to do some kind of like baiting maneuver to really get them to advance forward on your position. And then or you can try and get it like build up a strategy where you have units that can travel really far and that can actually initiate some kind of meaningful engagement. So you have this like really great back and forth of like really defensive play and like really aggressive offensive play. And it works really well because when the enemy attacks you very aggressively, they get the first attack, which means that like your units are not going to be as strong when they're counterattacking, which is not true in Fire Emblem. So they have like weak ass enemies run up to my super soldiers, my thunder chads, and then they attack them. The attack misses because they're attacking they're like the fucking grunts in a James Bond film attacking James Bond, and then like my unit just destroys them, and that's the end of the encounter. And I'm like, there's no strategic depth to this. I'm just sitting here, leaving my units in attacking range of the enemy, and the enemy just like walks over and commits suicide because there's no chance in hell they will ever be able to take out my units.
Well, the thing about Advanced Wars is because each unit has like essentially the 10 health or like the 10 kind of members in that like that cluster. So that's like how it works with the whole like they attack first, then yeah, the counterattack can't be nearly as good.
They visualize it as a battalion of tanks or a battalion of soldiers. So it's like, oh, if the enemy launches the first attack, then your battalion of soldiers is going to be weaker when they go to launch a counteroffensive, right?
They've knocked you down to 3 units, and then your 3 units attack back, and it's like nothing. Sorry, one of theirs goes away.
So, but like having that kind of back and forth works really well for the AI because the AI can like switch between like hard defense and really hard offense on a dime, and it actually makes sense. It actually poses some kind of challenge to the player. It gives them something to have to work around. It gives them something to have to think about instead of it just being like, oh, well, my units are just fucking invincible because I'm the hero. I'm the chosen one. I have the party of the chosen ones, and you are the bad guys. So my units are stronger, and I don't have to make any meaningful decisions about how to use them in this map. You can just come in and die every single turn. From what I've seen of Ian from Adventure Rules, shout out to Ian again. From what I've seen of him playing Radiant Dawn, or is that
Path
the one
of
he's
Radiance.
playing? Path of Radiance, thank you. That was not the case in older games, but sure as shit is stinky. In Awakening, like the back half of that game is completely brainless. You don't have to think at all. It's not balanced very well. It's just like every single encounter is just like the enemy committing suicide a bunch of times. You don't even need to fucking engage them. You can just like not move your units and they'll send like enough of their units to you. The only units that like won't move are like the ones that surround and guard the Lord unit of the respective map that you're playing on. I don't think it's a very good game. I think it's a very bad game, in fact. If you want to play an RPG, it's great. If you want to play a strategy game, Fire Emblem sucks dick.
Understood. I'm not much of a Fire Emblem guy myself, but I do own Awakening. I was going to give it a try based off of your glowing review of it last week, but
You might
maybe
like it
not.
more than me because you like
Mhm.
RPGs and I'm more interested in like strategy style stuff. So for me, it's like Advance Wars is the better version of what Fire Emblem's trying to do. And then like the best version of that is Into the Breach, which is an indie game that everyone should play. It's fan-fucking-tastic. For my money, a strategy RPG style game that is like good, I would say is like Total War, Warhammer. I've spent a shitload of time playing Total War Warhammer 2. That has commander units that you level up throughout the game, and they're like super units that you have leading each of your different squads. But that's like the only kind of like RPG-ification that exists, and then like the rest of the game is just like a straight up Total War strategy game. So each encounter, if you play it like ass cheeks, the enemy will just completely fucking wipe you out, which is not good because having your armies get completely wiped is just like, from an economic standpoint, it is not a good position for you to be in. And then you can't like defend the territories you have. For my money, that's like kind of more of what I enjoy, where it's like, okay, I have like a unit that you can have that like progression on your different lord units. And you really don't want them to die because if they die, they're gone. But then when you actually get into like combat encounters, you actually have to think about what you're going to do. If you play the game's combat on the harder difficulties, which I do, I only play the campaign maps on like normal because I can't fucking play the campaign maps on like hard, like anything higher than normal. But in the combat, I turn up to like the fucking second hardest difficulty. Because that's just like a very involved real-time strategy experience. Well, I guess it's kind of real-time. You can pause it whenever you want, as long as you're not playing online. But if you're just playing like offline, you can pause it whenever the hell you want to reorient where your units are going or where they're aiming their assaults. For me, that's like the ideal strategy RPG, where it's like the RPG stuff is there, but it's kind of in the background, and the strategy is much, much, much more emphasized. Also, I guess eventually I'll be playing Disgaea, which is kind of a strategy RPG. So we'll see what I think of that. That came from a recommendation from AK from Everything Is Bad For You. Shout out to AK from Everything Is Bad For You. Hopefully I end up liking that more than Fire Emblem Awakening, which I think is kind of irredeemable. Anyway, I've just spent the last like 30 minutes complaining. What have you been playing, Jason? I'm very curious to know what you've been playing.
After the last recording, playing One Piece World Seeker.
Well, thank Christ. Finally, we can stop getting One Punch Man and One Piece mixed up.
Yes, exactly.
So, what is that?
So this is, I think, the one of the latest One Piece games for the console, and unfortunately, Namco Bandai decided to copy Ubisoft's homework and then do it even more poorly with an open world where you're set as just one character in the base game for Luffy. And my god, does he control very, very clunkily.
Wait, hold on a second. There's like 10 or 11 different Straw Hat Pirates, and you only get to control one of them and Luffy?
Sorry, by one of them I mean only Luffy.
What the fuck?
In the base game, yes, you can only control one of them. Yeah, it's
You don't get to play any. Oh my god, what a. I mean,
exactly.
Luffy's got really cool powers, but like, what a misfire. Like, why the fuck wouldn't you let people play as the other characters? That's half of the appeal of that show, is like watching the different characters use their powers to beat the shit out of stuff.
Well, the problem is because of the open world nature of the game, you can't have these characters going around like. I mean, you can, because in the DLC they have a couple of them, but it really doesn't work all that well with them. So Luffy has like two modes. He's got like his like super stretchy mode, and then he's got his like uber defense mode. You will only use the uber defense mode because the other one later in the game basically just gets destroyed, and most of the equipment you'll do for like the higher attack is geared towards like this uber defense mode. He'll just block instead of like dodging, but blocking is much more effective than dodging, especially in this game. Because the problem is like Luffy will have this like kind of like grab move, and then if you hold it, you can go like flying in the direction. It's like some sort of like Luffy cannon thing. If you get into the city or so, like some sort of town, there's going to be a sniper, and you'll have no notice that the sniper isn't noticing you, and then he'll just shoot you down, and you just have to go back to the ground and like start over again.
Okay, that's super frustrating. I know it's unrealistic, but anytime you have long range enemies that are targeting people, you have to give the player some kind of indication that they're being fired at or they're about to be fired at. Whether it's like obnoxiously long sniper scopes, which don't like the red dot thing that a lot of like shooters use.
It's got none of that. That's the problem. That's the big
that's
problem.
like not realistic at all, but like that's not supposed to be. It's supposed to make the game less frustrating for the fucking person playing it.
Yeah, and here's the most annoying part about this mechanic. So if you go flying and then you can combo the flying around and around and around. If you go too far in one direction, let's say you end up in the water, because of the nature of the game, it does like a Red Dead thing. Other than you're not dead. You end up going back to the point where you started flying around. You don't go back to like the nearest point of the map, like of the area, and then
So it sends you back to the last time you were touching the ground.
yeah, which is a problem because if you go too far, you can actually end up in a loading screen to wait for you to respawn back at that point.
Sounds like the people who made this game have no idea what they were doing.
Exactly. You should have just ended up. This is my therapy session on One Piece.
Oh, Jesus. Well, how does that make you feel?
Well, if the invincibility frames didn't make me miss my special moves against the enemies, I might have had a better reaction to this game. I'm not joking. So there's a problem where like if you do enough of a combo, the enemy will just either, which is fine, it breaks off from it, but like often that means they have like an invisibility frame, and I've missed so many of my special attacks while they've just either teleported away afterwards, or I thought in the combo it was gonna let me do that. So the number of times you've missed, like I've missed, is just ridiculous.
That's pretty unfortunate.
I will say though, it is fortunately shorter than a season of One Piece.
That's not hard to do. One Piece is so
Fucking long.
sorry, One Piece fans out there. I like One Piece, but I am waiting for it to be done so they can do what they did with Dragon Ball, where they release an abridged version of it.
It will never be done.
Oh my god, it will never.
You know,
be
it
done.
celebrated 1,000th chapter, right?
No, I
It
don't.
celebrated 1,000 chapters because it's from like 1999 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like One Piece. I just really don't like One Piece's amount of padding, which is extraordinary. There is so many episodes that just don't need to exist. I stopped watching it around episode 300 because I'm like, the last
You went
15
farther than me.
the last 15 episodes have been nothing, man. Like, they have like 2 episodes worth of content across that. It's fucking frustrating. I don't have time for this shit. So anything else about One Piece?
Yeah, it has the audacity to not let you fucking jump until the tutorial lets you say you can fucking jump.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
I was like, the X button is not letting me jump. This is definitely supposed to let me. And then you do it like you're walking around for like 5 minutes, and it's like, if you press the X button, you could jump. But I'm like,
Yeah,
fucking don't do that. Fucking
game
stupid.
developers don't disable controls in a tutorial area. If your player wants to figure out how to play the game themselves, you should let them. You should not wait to enable things that are basic actions when the tutorial tells them they're allowed to do them. That is actually fucking stupid.
It's such ass. Like I was just like, why can't I fucking jump? That's the stupidest thing. The running doesn't like feel right. Everything about the combat's so clunky and clumsy. It's just not a good game. And I've played a good game. Like I've played I think it was like Red Unlimited or something like that. In that game you gotta play as a party of the straw hat crew, and then you get to play as them in each individually. So that actually works well.
Okay, so it actually is like entire levels built around playing as like Luffy or Zoro or Sanji, Nami.
Yeah, like you can pick your party. It's like a group of 3. You got to go out into a mission.
Nico Robin, the most broken member of the Straw Hat Pirates, which is why she constantly gets sent away every time there's a boss fight. It's like, nah, Luffy has to beat this boss because Nico Robin could just win because she's just fucking, her power is like god power.
Yeah.
She can spawn infinite number of hands wherever she wants to. She can just like restrain and strangle every single character. I guess spoilers for One Piece. The part where I was at is the only like boss style fight or big bad style fight or whatever the fuck. I call them bosses because it's like I'm familiar with like video game terminology before I am anime terminology. But like,
do you mean a climax?
Sure, whatever. The current boss guy that they're fighting is like, he uses like lightning powers, and I'm like, he is the only boss guy in the entire. Miranda's watched farther than I have, but she's like, yeah, he's the only guy in the entire series that only Luffy can fight because his powers are electricity and Luffy's power is being made of rubber. So the guy just like literally can't do anything to Luffy.
Yep.
I bet that guy felt like ass. He used his like lightning powers, and Luffy's like, I literally didn't feel anything. It's like, oh, well, that fight probably was over quick, like quick in
but
One
I'm
Piece.
a god. Like, no, you can't.
Yeah, basically, it's like quick in One Piece is still gonna be like fucking 4 weeks worth of episodes.
Yeah. So if you get the expansion pass like I did,
Who can you play in the expansion?
you get to play as Zoro.
Okay.
He can at least control a lot differently than Luffy, so that's kind of nice.
Imagine that is the case for a swordsman.
He's able to like climb up walls like Spider-Man, which is like jumping up each like up a wall.
That sounds like Zoro.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy's like half samurai, half ninja.
Yeah. His whole story is about fighting a fucking robot. I don't care. I'm spoiling this. Fuck it. Sabo, you don't know about Sabo. He's another of like Luffy's brother, like not like a
Ace?
brother, but like a kind of like another ace.
Okay.
He's got fire powers. He controls more or less like a combination of Zoro and Luffy. And then you get to play as Law, and then Law has the swordsman of Zoro, but then he also gets to have the teleportation like in Dishonored, which is
Okay.
actually kind of cool. And then that one has a lot more stealth, and I really thought the stealth in this game was pretty shit. Yeah, you have to like follow as like Assassin's Creed like style, like one stealth section. Like
Oh
follow
my
these groups.
God.
I was like, this is fucking Ubisoft game. Fuck.
Trailing missions are the worst. Don't include them in any game ever. There's no way to make those fun.
Oh, and I almost forgot the most sacrilegious thing that they did. So, in an open world game, for boss fights, you're in this enclosed area. And if you go too far out, the game's just like, game over. Sorry, you fled the fight. What's even worse is when the enemy just damages you and you're near the edge, and then they shoot you far enough.
Fucking ringed out.
Then they ring you out. Yeah, exactly. In a fucking open world game, you don't do that fucking shit.
Yeah, Rockstar actually does that in every single one of their games.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So, like, they have their games designed as like giant sandboxes, but in every mission, if you deviate from the path you're supposed to stay on at all, the mission fails immediately.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so it's like you go off of the expected path during a mission, then it immediately kills you and fails you and puts you back to the last checkpoint.
One of the things I did was I fired off one of the special moves, and then like the person ended up teleporting farther away, so the special move kept going outside of the area. I'm allowed to attack them, but then it's like, oh, sorry, I guess I went too far out of the area. Game over. And I'm like, but he's over there. What the fuck?
This game sounds like ass cheek. What was it? What's the full name of it?
One Piece World Seeker.
One Piece.
One Piece World Seek my refund, please.
This has a 58% on Metacritic. Why do you keep playing bad games?
Shut up.
Got a 4.8 from IGN. Even IGN didn't like it. IGN likes everything.
Okay, I played it for two reasons. I don't mind One Piece, and now we can talk about One Piece on the podcast because I kind of want to make fun of the 4Kids One Piece.
Oh yeah, we didn't mention the fact that Sanji's cigarette is a lollipop and the 4Kids.
Yeah, he's smoking a
lollipop.
Smoking a lollipop. Goddamn fucking 4Kids in there. Censorship was the funniest thing on the planet.
This is $80. Oh my god. I see the flying thing in the trailer.
I did not spend that. I spent like $20.
Oh well. I mean, it looks cool. It's just it sounds like nothing about this game works.
Yeah, nothing will really work. And then the character models are like, of anyone who's an NPC, is like looks like it's a PS2 or PS3 game at like early stages, and then like the character models of the actual like Straw Hat crew and the rest of the bosses look actually relatively good. It's just when you talk to an NPC, it's like, oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with your face?
These NPCs all look like you're not wrong.
Yeah, they all look like ass. They're like
they look like ass.
Static. Anyway, I'll talk about games I like.
Get into the fucking science experiment you did this week. I know what other games you played now that I remembered it while you were talking about One Piece.
I wondered why Yakuza Like a Dragon didn't click very well. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the RPG stuff is very shallow, I'd say. So I decided on playing Dragon Quest IV Chapters of the Chosen again to see why it didn't gel with me, or you just don't like JRPGs in general. But
I just don't like JRPGs in general, so there's no hope for me. But
for me, like it worked a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's, or at least the ones I play are on the DS, so they're portable. So it's like a quick kind of like start and then stop and pick it up a little bit later and do it in little chunks. I think that helps a lot with flow or dealing with the repetition of some of the encounters. I mean, Dragon Quest at least has a lot of funny monsters. Like in 11, there's like a cactus that when it dies, it's got like a spear and then it collapses and the spear just impales it. a lot of the bosses are kind of funny, especially like their animations when they die, and the newer ones more than the older ones because they're just sprites. The main chapter I want to highlight the most is chapter 3, which is about this guy called Torneko. I might be saying that wrong, but oh well.
Whatever.
So his chapter is all about like kind of starting his life off, working his way up to being kind of a merchant. It kind of reminded me of Yakuza Like a Dragon about like them escaping being homeless.
Okay.
But unlike in Yakuza, really the driving factor is the story. And this one in Dragon Quest at 4, it's like a series of goals. Like, you should probably go get this steel box because if you die in the world, because you're just a weak old merchant, you don't lose half your money from encounters. There's like an incentive to do that because then a lot of the mechanics in this chapter are based off of you accumulating a lot of money in order to buy this shop that's like $35,000. Simple enemies like a slime might drop like an iron armor, which sells for a lot of gold. Like this chapter is almost kind of a parody on Dragon Quest in general.
It sounds like the mechanics and the story are actually aligning here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like in the story, I need money to become like a merchant. So then instead of like getting EXP, you get money from everything that you kill.
Yeah, you get some experience, but you also get money, and then you get like items that they drop that are really
It's not like it's dropping money, but it's like dropping something that you can sell for money. So you're engaging with a mechanic that's like, okay, I'm merchanting, right? Like I'm getting things and then I'm selling them. That's what a merchant
Yeah, and I
does.
mean, even one of the encounters might be just a merchant. Like you'll go into the encounter and it'll be a merchant instead. There'll be an option to buy or sell from them, like in the map. Like it's kind of funny. I like the mechanic because it's really just kind of funny to be like, oh, here's another fight, and it's like, oh, it's just this friendly old merchant. No, I don't want to buy anything from you. I'm fine. So the end goal being like $60,000, which is a lot for a Dragon Quest game, but you can probably power through that in like I'd say half an hour with the mechanics that they give you. Like each time that you try and get to the next level, there'll be like really quick, easy way of getting it. Like one's like, oh, go get this silver goddess statue, and then this rich old man's gonna buy it for like 25K from of the 35K that you need, and on the way that you've been doing that questing, you've gotten a lot of items from the monsters, and then you can sell those at your shop. Weirdly enough, everyone's kind of dumb in the world though, because you are able to sell everything for 50% more than it's actually worth at other stores, which really confuses me. But I think that's also to just make things go a lot quicker.
Yeah, I would say it's probably like a pacing thing.
Yeah, that was the kind of the main chapter that I really really like because it's a lot different from the other. Because this one has like 5 chapters, and then the first 2 are very kind of really samey, and then the fourth one's kind of samey, and then the fifth one is kind of everyone's story's been told, and now it's the chosen ones going around and meeting these party members that you've had like 1 to 2 hour chapters about, and like kind of recruit them essentially, and then make your way to the final boss. So I'm on chapter 5 at this point, and that's takes maybe about 8 to 10 hours to kind of get through. Probably a little less if you knew what you were doing. So I played that one, and then I ended up playing Dragon Quest Heroes 2, which is the Warrior Styles game.
Okay, that's a Muso style game, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think it's better than the first one, which I've put some time into. There's a bit more mission variety, though. Unfortunately, some of the mechanics it kind of does it does a lot of one-offs. Like, oh, this is going to happen once, but at the same point, that means it didn't overstay its welcome. So
Okay.
fair enough. Something I think that was new they introduced was this kind of trade system for resources for slightly better quality resources. Except when you start at the beginning, one lady's like selling horse manure for the trade, and I'm like,
What the fuck?
no, I'm not trading you like 6 resources for 2 horse manure. What the
I
fuck
don't
are
want,
you?
I don't want 2 blocks of turds. What the fuck?
I mean, one of the great things about this one is, and the last one is there's some quests that actually have meaningful rewards. Like you'll get more space for these monster tokens, and then there's better quality heal stones that are how you can like kind of do one-time heals. Can be helpful in certain fights. But we'll talk about my favorite feature, which is these monster tokens. So there's 3 types. There's a battlefield minions, so you can summon these and then they'll fight in your place, and they kind of almost aggro the enemies into it always attacking them. So if you time it
That
well, then you can like use it against the bosses and whatnot.
that sounds pretty useful.
Hmm. There are one-time uses. These, I'd say, are the weakest of the three, where you get to, as I said, use it one time, and that could be anything from, like, does this big explosion to heals all your MP. Can be useful, but the last one is you get to transform into the monster. So you get to be like the golem, or you get to be like the horse, like one of the horse riders. That part of it is a lot of fun because they've got a lot of different move sets. We can be like
a big chungus and then just start like just chatting the shit out of everything.
Balanced for the bosses, but yeah, if you use it against like the mobs of enemies, which is what is always great about a Warriors game.
I mean, it'd still be cool fighting against the boss. Like you beat up their like minions and they start punching their dick off.
Yeah, the transforming is like really, really cool. I'm near the end. Like with many Dragon Quest games, there's always this huge difficulty spike near the end where you're gonna have to either grind or do enough of these quests to get like kind of the better upgrade or the equipment.
Nope.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's fairly balanced throughout the rest of the campaign. So I'll probably have that done this week or next week.
Man, you're making way more progress on games than I am this year. So far, all I've managed to do is fucking replay 2 games that I've already spent a lot of time with. 3 games, actually.
To be fair, Dragon Quest 4 is like probably my like 3rd playthrough, I think.
Okay, so you just like know where all the things are.
Anyway, that's it from me. That means it's outro time. You can follow this podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Stitcher, or any of the other platforms this podcast is available on. You can follow us on the Frosty Canucks Twitter account, and you'll be notified about when these episodes go live. And that's it from me. Frosty, what have you got to say?
You should go read my shit on frostylite.ca. I wrote about Carto. I have an article that I'll be putting out next week. Probably going to be the one where I bitch in detail about why the Clutch Claw's a piece of shit. That is going to echo a lot of the things that I said here, because I was basically just paraphrasing my fucking article while talking about it on this podcast, though it's a little bit more detailed. Yes, definitely go check that out on the website. There's also some other interesting stuff if you want to delve into my back catalog of articles, which I would encourage you to do because I occasionally write things that are smart. As far as socials go, Twitter for updates about everything. You can follow me on Twitch for a Frosty Fridays, which is every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where I stream either video games or art. You can follow me on Instagram if you just want to watch or look at my art stuff. I use that as just an art place. I post all the art on Twitter as well. It's just if you just want art, you can just follow me on Instagram because that's basically just my art Instagram thing. But yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Thanks everyone for listening and stay frosty.